All right, so welcome to our current lesson in Fathers of Nations. So I'm going to handle the fourth essay from the time we began. And today I'm focusing on one question here, prediction. However bad things may be, they can never be forever. Using Fathers of Nation by Paul Vita, Justify the Reality. All right, so I hope you are conversant with our current novel, which is political. And as I told you earlier, you need to focus on the introduction, make clarity of what you're going to discuss. When you come to the body, have the four body paragraphs clearly giving a topic sentence related to your question, and then bring in a background that gives us an explanation of where, when, who, what, and why. So we are going to see how we'll be handling this question. However bad things may be, they can never be forever. It can be said in another way, maybe change is inevitable, or any other form, like hope is important during times when everything is low. So let's get moving. Welcome on board if you're coming live as we proceed with this question. So my introduction is here, and I wish to welcome critics, of course, on board because this is where we make it. Now, the introduction is this: we might face hard times in life that um, may bring us down. That does not mean we despair because it's never the end of life. In Fathers of Nation, the truth of the situation is seen from the lives of Kimani, Tahir, Melusi, and Chamaka. So I hope you've got the introduction. We've clearly said what we are going to discuss to show the truth that when you hit the dead end or the dead rock, that is not supposed to, give you disillusionment. In one situation, you may be low, but hope for the better. Now, when we look at the text, I'm going to quickly go through the different characters, and you will actually hear me giving you the topic sentences. So I'm going to begin with Chamaka. So my topic sentence is Chamaka loses his face and worth when he preaches against the president and emphasizes to critique his ways. However, that is not the end of him when he picks up himself through the third long way and everything, flows. Thank you for coming on board. I can see some people, live. Thank you. So Chamaka loses his face and worth when he preaches against the president. However, that is not the end. Regardless of having been banned from preaching in Nigeria, everything is picked out when he joins ACDA. Yeah, so let's see the background information of this, and the details are here. Chamaka preaches in church about the president's wrong ways in which he is remote controlling Nigeria. Of course, there are fires that emanate in one of the places within Nigeria, and instead of the president acting, he writes a simple memo to condemn the situation without actually intervening. So that time, Chamaka is a preacher and he goes in church talking about it. And before we know it, he's arrested. He spends 2 weeks in a rat infested jail. When he's released, of course, all of us know he's banned from preaching and his church is closed. Remember, he had been a reckless driver, and this is the only way in which he thought a miracle had happened in his life, and he could actually showcase his way of teaching people. And of course, we know somehow it was radical. Regardless, the turning point in his life comes out now because he had, you know, came out of a fatal accident in which his Mercedes Benz rolled and almost killed him, but nothing happened actually. This misfortune makes him bitter, yeah, and he only had the revival through AGDA when they select him to be part of the group supporting Path Alpha. When he goes to attend the summit we all of us know that he went for the summit. Of course, he uses the platform to praise God, and he insists that the heads say amen. And of course, at the end of the day, we see the president saying that. Yeah. And at the end of the summit, Agda wins it. So Chamaka celebrates because you can actually see that his fall had come, but then he rises here. The second paragraph will focus on Kimani. Kimani's situation worsens when he finds himself alone after the death of Tuni and the exit of the wife. However, things do not end there. Regardless of the challenges he faces, life becomes better when he joins Agda. Now, the background information to this: Kimani encounters a tough time after the loss of the daughter. And given that from the text we are told that lecturers were receiving a very small salary compared to politicians, the wife leaves him to marry Walomu, the MP, who has several fleets of vehicles and is a bit better financially. She had been reminding him to leave teaching so that she can get green pastures, and he did not hear, of course. He was fixed in teaching, thinking he was born teacher and he would die teacher. Now, after the death of the daughter, Asia is a bit inconsolable, and when she becomes, communicative, the only thing she does is to drop a bomb at night, tell Kimani that she's leaving for Walomo because Walomo has asked to marry her. Yeah, so we see that Kimani goes to Walomo's office. He insults Walomo as a baboon, a fat baboon, and at the end of it, they fight. He is the one arrested. He's put in jail for 6 months. And later, as he comes out with the hope of life, he's in despair. Of course, we can see that he cannot sleep. Yeah, the trauma of it. He can't even sleep. Now, remember, he's alone. He's in despair. The daughter died. And he's almost given up because one thing, he was demoted from full professor back to the senior lecturer. Yeah, so everything is not at a loss. As we see, Tad Longway comes to his door and recruits him as an observer behind Path Alpha. Now he's afraid. How will he go to the summit? He's supported financially and he goes to the summit, yeah, meeting 50 heads of states. So we see that regardless of not believing that he can be an activist, now he stands to support his strategy, that is Path Alpha, and he says that he deserves respect alongside the rest of the teachers. So now here we can see victory as Path Alpha takes the day in the summit. Let's get to Melusi. Melusi fights for independence alongside Boma, and later he loses everything because of this. After independence, of course, knowing that they had fought hand in hand with the Boma, he's called comrade. However, the president realizes that the opposition needs to be weakened, and what he does, he forms a group known as Kukurahundi that comes out to sweep, the chaff. And he also has the rigging of election happens that even when Melusi stands in his own party, he loses it. So Melusi is quite hurt, but in the process, remember, the wife is lost because he's smothered by the government. We realize that he meets Tad as his hope is restored. And when he joins Agda, of course, his aim is to revenge. However, it happens that he's arrested when he confronts the president within the summit. Regardless, literally, we can say he won or there was hope because now Path Alpha took the day. Let's get to Tahir. The paragraph on Tahir. Tahir is totally depressed after losing his eye in the quote accident within the weapon Feast of Allah group. He swears that he can even lose the other in the effort to fight for the culture he believes in, that is the Libyan culture. Let's get to the background. It's clearly indicated in the text that Tahir had a patriotic heart in which he was celebrating the culture of Libya, and hence, all through his life, after studying, he comes back home and joins the Feast of Allah, celebrates when the president, of course, introduces it, knowing that Libya would be stronger than any other country. In the process, there is a striking of, like America is struck by the Al Shabaab, and it happens that after this, Libya is asked to compensate those who lost, yeah, their lives and such. And so the president is forced to close the Feast of Allah. We also see that one day, Tahir goes to approach, yeah, one beautiful lady within that organization, Miss Mahmoud, if all of us know, and he asks that they go out for a soup of tomato. And of course, as a decent woman, Miss Mahmoud rejects, a sweet no, giving a sweet no, as she smiles, and Tahir feels insulted. So he's so annoyed that he cannot stand it and decides to retaliate. So what he does is slaps Miss Mahmoud on, uh, the week when they're actually observing the traditions. And so, in an inflex action, we see that Miss Mahmoud, loses the opener, the envelope opener in her hand, and it lands in Tahir's eye. So his eye is actually deformed, and he loses it later in an operation. They place an artificial eye that he hates, actually. Yeah, he loathes, of course. So he's hopeless, and even though he revenges Miss Mahmoud, he is not actually satisfied, and he has to move from Tripoli to Benghazi. He lives a desperate life, lonely life kind of, and that is where he meets Ted Longway, and his hope is restored. Now we can actually see him in the summit, even in the hotel, and there is some hope within him compared to in past. Yeah, so those are the four paragraphs that we have focused on. I hope you saw the background information clearly given, the topic sentence clearly given, and the introduction was clear. So let's come to our conclusion. Most students have a challenge with the conclusion of an essay. Now, conclusion is not reiteration of the question. It is actually telling us a general lesson, telling us what is this that we've learned from the entire essay. Yeah, so indeed, every dog has its day. Nothing is so hard for anyone, and times end, be it good or bad. So in Fathers of Nation, we learn the reality of the situation unveiled in the lens of Chamaka Tahir, Kimani, and Melusi. So I hope that if you meet a question or if a student is answering a question, let them not narrate. Most students tend to narrate. A student may know the entire story, but if they are not actually relating what they are saying to the question, a student may come about just talk about Melusi, talk about Tahir, Chamaka, without actually relating to the question. That is called narration, and they'll score zero. They may score for introduction if they gave the right introduction, but the rest will be a zero. So be careful while marking such work, because you will tend to find narrations. Sometimes you will find situations whereby students are giving what is not satisfactory and pointed. And pointed is a paragraph whereby a student is just giving information about the text, but there's nothing to do with that, the question. They're just giving information but nothing related to your points, as in the ones we've seen in our question. Now, conclusion, most students tend to reiterate the question. That's not the issue. We want a general lesson. What have you observed? Yeah, so as we come to the end of our life, I'm appreciative for those who came alive. Otherwise, have a nice time.